Capital markets are imperative for financing development, and I'm, keen to share with you, this data which is staring all of us in the face, but which we're not paying attention to. When you think about the most developed capital markets in the world today, and I'm pleased that the SEC DG in his comments, spoke extensively about the US markets. Capital markets provide 81% of financing. Only about 19% is raised from the banks. In Nigeria today, the converse is the case. 30% is raised from capital markets, but again, as the SEC said, 90% of that 30% is raised by the federal government. And when the federal government spends all of its money primarily on recurrent expenditure, it's no wonder that you have all the challenges that we have with infrastructure, with housing, and all of these elements across the country. So this time calls for a real move from a leadership perspective. And there is one global regulation that we haven't paid attention to as a nation, but which is inevitable and which is a reality that the rest of the world has to deal with. And that is Basel III. And all Nigerian banks, by the end of next year, will have to comply with Basel III. And what you will see happen with Basel III is that the tenor of bank loans, which have been reducing all the time in Nigeria, will continue to reduce. As at the end of the second quarter of this year, the average tenor of bank loans in Nigeria was 2.43 years. How can you finance sustainable development in any market with 2.5-year money? I'm a big dreamer, and I think in order for us to achieve everything that we have to achieve here, we all need to dream a bit. And I have this dream, and I share this message often with people when I talk about financing Nigerian infrastructure, that one day this great nation, Nigeria, will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed as Africa's largest economy. I have a dream that one day, across Nigeria, our children will be able to take the train and visit their friends from Lagos to Abuja in no more than 4 hours, as we open up each region of the country with the rail, and the young Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba youths are able to join hands across Nigeria as sisters and brothers. I'm inspired by Martin Luther King's famous words in Washington, D.C. on August 28, 1963. It just so happens that today is September 28, 2017. It took America 45 years to put a black man into the White House. My dream is that within 45 months from today, we will begin to transform Nigeria's debt capital markets, and as a result, we will solve Nigeria's infrastructure challenges and also lift all of our country. Why is infrastructure important? Infrastructure is a significant enabler of economic growth. And wouldn't you like to see Nigeria's infrastructure looking like this? For many of our guests here today, they arrived either through the international or local airport. And what a sight that must have been. Social infrastructure is even more important. And one day, every single university in Nigeria will look like that university campus up there. At a particular point in time, the University College Hospital in Ibadan in the 60s looked like that. And people came from all over the Commonwealth to be educated in Nigeria. All of the Saudi royal family, you wouldn't believe it, at some point or the other, went to school in Ibadan, in Nigeria, in the 60s. Our infrastructure challenge is a significant one, but it's one, to my mind, which is easily financeable if we begin to commit to the leadership that's required to deal with it. I regard Nigeria very much as the last global frontier for infrastructure financing. And we will either have to finance that infrastructure over the next decade. Otherwise, we will find that in addition to shipping oil abroad, we will be shipping loads of migrants every day into Europe, into other parts of the world, because we have not created the environment in which they can live in this country. If that housing deficit is indeed 16 million, and you assume that an average house costs, let's say, 10 million naira to build, the opportunity essentially is a 160 trillion naira one. If nothing else, I hope that number grabs you, and I hope you begin to recognize the opportunity that all of the capital markets have. We have a chance here also to issue a significant amount in mortgages, and the mortgage opportunity could easily be equally as large. And some estimate that at the minimum, that mortgage opportunity today is a 200 trillion naira mortgage. And we have all of these instruments that can be issued through debt capital markets that do provide us an opportunity, essentially, to transit our situation. In Islamic finance, globally, this market is a $3 trillion market. We issued our first sukuk in this country, as was mentioned, some 4 years ago, for a subnational, interestingly, that was more progressive than the sovereign at the time. The sovereign has finally come to the party, and I'm indeed delighted that its first outing really was significant provenance for the capacity that that market has. But that market is also important for one reason, and the significant reason is its alignment, essentially, with a majority of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, which are all about alleviating poverty, improving quality of living, and lifting Nigerians and all the people of the world, out of poverty. We also have this new opportunity and vista of sustainable finance. And sustainable finance is essentially important to us because it's not only accretive to all of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but it provides us another significant opportunity to create financing for low-carbon infrastructure. All of Nigeria's challenges, without exception, have debt capital market solutions. We can finance and invest in and develop our physical and social infrastructure. It's that infrastructure which will enable you to diversify an economy. For the first time in a long time, you're hearing everybody in government now talk about infrastructure, because they finally figured out that developing agriculture is primarily about power and transportation networks. Developing Nigeria's mining reserves, which apparently are far more valuable than our oil and gas reserves, again is fundamentally about power and rail transportation. Infrastructure not only enables diversification, but it's what actually will create industrialization. Infrastructure attracts investments, and we spent the last few months working on a big government campaign around the ease of doing business, looking to lift our position in the World Economic Forum's competitive rankings. But we focus only on the soft issues. We refuse to address the most important issue, which was infrastructure. And guess what happened? Yesterday, we all read on the news wires the latest World Economic Forum competitive rankings. We have moved up 2 places, from 157 to 155th position. I commend that, but quite frankly, if we focused on addressing issues like infrastructure, you would see a much more significant quantum movement in our position and the attraction of our company country, to investors. And let me be very clear about one thing, because sometimes people in government tend to think that it's government that creates jobs. And unfortunately, that is not the case. It is investments and investors that creates jobs. And when you have a country that has a predominantly young population with an average age of 18 years, the most important responsibility that you and I have in public and private sector is to create jobs in a sustainable manner. But in order for those people to be employable, you also have to lift our quality of life standards, and in particular our educational standards. And again, infrastructure can play a very substantial role across the entire education and literacy value chain.